everything from updates on the Baphomet statue, Ten Commandments lawsuit, as well as the governor and the legislature's tax cut plan. I've got an interesting theory on that. Also, the government shutdown is over. People starting back to work today. But the biggest story of the day, in my opinion, is the fact that State Representative Jeff Wardlaw has been found out. And that really is the news that was on the front page of the Democrat Gazette yesterday. State Representative Jeff Wardlaw, and has now been discovered, has used his position as a legislator to secretly enrich himself. And now we know about it. And, of course, this has to do with, wait for it, relationships with Medicaid entities, relationships with legislators and Medicaid, meaning government money. And now it's going to be very interesting now that we know what we know. And I'll get into all the details. The Gazette had the article yesterday. Very good reporting. Now that we know what we know, it'll be very interesting to go back and see who was against having to disclose relationships as legislators between Medicaid entities and who voted which way. I mean, the fact of the matter is State Representative Jeff Wardlaw has been, up until this session, the chairman of the Public Health Committee. It's just insane. This is absolutely insane. But we're finding out more and more. Here's another example of the corruption that is in our own government. We will talk about this and much, much more coming up on the program, which starts in 10 seconds.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. We're going to start a new week here in our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. I hope you've had a great weekend. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine, and we can't do it without you. 870-275-9799. That is the telephone number if you would like to contribute to the program today. That's 870-275-9799. We're going to be watching this week to see if things kind of kick up. The Gazette this morning, they are noticing what I am noticing, and that is a lot of people were wanting the tax cut legislation or the tax legislation to be filed last week, and it wasn't. So they certainly taken notice of that. There's some talk that they had to revise some things, and there's some other talk that the Department of Finance and Administration under the plan found out that 200,000 some odd Arkansans would face actually a tax increase if we simplify the brackets as well as go forward with trying to cut the income tax. Now, I know you guys probably out there already know, but there may be some other people out there who are listening for the first time that don't know. But the bottom line is this: you can cut taxes, specifically the income tax, and you can raise taxes other places and it not actually be a tax cut. We have to keep that in mind, that it may be all well and good and it may sound great to have an income tax cut, but if you raise taxes over here more than you cut them in this one category, the income tax cut, and the people of Arkansas are now paying more money out of their pocket. That is a tax increase, not a tax cut. It's very important that we understand what the definitions of words and phrases are so that we can accurately characterize and quantify what it is the legislator is doing, what it is the legislature is not doing, okay? So we're going to continue with that. We're going to move forward with that based on those definitions, okay? And I think the legislature knows that more and more people understand what those definitions are moving forward. So we're going to get to that. Also, next hour, State Representative Dan Sullivan's going to swing by, and we're going to talk a little bit about free speech, the freedom of speech on college campuses. You know, that used to be a bedrock principle in this country, didn't it? I mean, you know, if you go back and actually understand what a liberal used to be, a classical liberal used to be, I mean, they used to be for freedom. They used to embrace this idea of, hey, I'm an American, I can say what I want to say, and leave me alone. That's not necessarily the case anymore. Now the liberal left, it's not longer classical liberalism, it's leftism, it's progressivism, and they say, no, we need to have standards. We need to force people to speak the way we think is appropriate. Oh, and don't leave me alone. Verify my lifestyle, heartily approve of it. I need some authority somewhere to affirm me and tell me that everything's going to be okay. That's now the snowflake mentality. Anyway, oh, by the way, I watched this show on YouTube called Hot Ones. Do you watch this show? It's where they get celebrities in and they make them eat really, really spicy wings. And they've got like 8 wings there, 8 to 10 wings, and each sauce is different. Anyway, Gordon Ramsay recently was on Hot Ones. Oh man, and it was pretty funny to to watch some Master Chef. Just oh man, and the thing is, the questions keep coming. Like anyway, it's a fantastic show. All right. Telephone number, again, 870-275-979. The government shutdown, let's get to that. The government shutdown is over. Government no longer shut down as of today. President Trump on Friday announced that he would sign a 3-week extension, or 3-week, basically, CR, continued resolution, open the government back up. So everybody's paid, everything's fine. And the ball now is in the Democrats' court. Are they going to negotiate or not? Now, you and I both know that they hate this man. They don't care about the dreamers. They don't care about the DACA kids. If they did care, they would have actually come to the table and tried to fix the problem. Once again, this is now the second time this has happened. The Democrat Party has made a political calculation. And that calculation is that they hate Donald Trump so much they would rather these poor DACA children, who are many of them adults now, remain victims and tools to amass and maintain political power than they would rather actually solve the problem of the people they claim to care about. It is patently obvious for anyone with a brain that the Democrat Party only sees the DACA problem as a way to maintain and amass political power. They do not care about the DACA kids, period. That is abundantly clear, and I'm never going to. I mean, I would dispute anybody who said otherwise regarding that. Now, all that, we're going to be probably back in the exact same situation in about 14 days. About 14, 15 days, we're going to be in the exact same situation because I don't think the Democrats are going to allow President Trump to have the money that he wants to construct his barrier, fence, wall, whatever you want to call it. They're not going to do it because they hate this man. They have supported barriers and fences in the past, but they don't care about that. They don't care that when you put up a fence or barrier or wall or whatever you want to call it, that crossings in that area decrease 90%. They don't care about those statistics. And you know what they also don't care about? And the mainstream media, you think, would be doing investigative report after investigative report, President Trump, more and more, when he talks about the crisis at the border, talks about human and sex trafficking more than anything else. And no one wants to actually talk about this problem. You would think the mainstream media would be attempting to say, really, is this a problem? And, we're in the era of the Me Too movement, right? And there's no way that, our outrage about alleged or, actually real sexual acts or there's no way that that's all just selective in our outrage. We're not selective in our outrage about that, right? Fight the patriarchy. But we don't really care about the men who are smuggling women and children as sex slaves across the border. We're okay with that patriarchy. You see the double standard here? Does anybody see the double standard? You'd think the media would be all over this. But in order to cover it, it verifies Trump's point. And Orange Man is bad. Orange Man bad. And we're all non-playable characters, and we just have to regurgitate whatever the media chooses to cover and tell us is the outrage of the day. I, for one, am just sick of this nonsense. I'm absolutely sick of it. If the media was objective at all, that you could easily report this fairly. And you know what? When things are reported fairly, wouldn't you know it, even young college students understand what's really going on here when they actually hear the news. This is Cabot Phillips over at Campus Reform. We got this YouTube video. I saw this on Friday. This was before Trump. Keep in mind, this was before Trump announced that he was going to reopen. Of course, everyone says that Trump caved, by the way. Did you know this? Well, they're saying that because Trump didn't get the border wall funding, everybody says he caved and everything else. It is open up to interpretation. I didn't think he would open up the government without wall funding.
What's your thought on who's to blame for that?
But I also think that if you actually look at where things are now, President Trump has repositioned himself to where, people now have their paychecks. Okay, were they serious? They said they wanted the government open. He gave the Democrats what they wanted. They said, well, we'd like for you to open the government up, and then we'll talk border security. President Trump says, okay, here you go. Will they do it? No. Will Trump declare a national emergency? It's becoming increasingly likely that he will. Even though you've got people like Marco Rubio and other Republicans saying that they'll fight the president on it because it sets a bad precedent. Yeah, it really does set a bad. One president's power that is celebrated now can be lamented when the next president's in office. I totally understand that. I get that argument 100%. Is it a crisis down there, though? Is it a crisis? This is the question. Now, many people might say, well, no, it's not a crisis because this has been going on for decades and it hasn't been a big deal. Maybe it hasn't been a big deal because the media hasn't covered it. Maybe it hasn't been a big deal, and to your knowledge, it hasn't been a big deal. I mean, what if you've been lied to this whole time? What if it has been an emergency and a crisis at the border for decades, but because you have some Republican business interests that benefit from the low wages, and you have Democrats that want future votes, if not, they want illegal aliens voting, which there are many reports now coming out, or I should say, I have seen some reporting coming out that are suggesting that they have the numbers of how many illegals voted last, and it's staggering in Texas and California. Staggering how many illegal immigrants are actually voting. Okay, so you see, so could it possibly be that this whole thing has been an emergency and a crisis for decades, but no one has actually drawn the American people's attention to it? I want you to consider that possibility. This is a big country. We like to think the world's getting smaller with the internet and the media and everything else. Maybe it's just getting more easily. It's getting easier to control, right? We fast have the technology to enslave ourselves, if we're honest about it. Here is Cabot Phillips with Campus Reform asking these kids what they think about the government shutdown and who's to blame. And listen to who they think's to blame, Trump, but then they get extra information, and they're kind of shocked they are. Listen. Again, it's Campus Reform's video here.
What's your thought on who's to blame for the shutdown?
The president.
I think specifically Trump. Since this has been the longest government shutdown, he is mainly responsible.
Personally, Trump.
I would definitely say Trump.
I would say mostly on Trump.
Maybe get the government working again, that would be good.
I would say Trump is to blame.
Okay.
Yeah, Trump is probably to blame.
If President Trump were to make some of the concessions that Democrats have been asking for, like protection for DACA Dreamers, $800 million for humanitarian aid, extra funding for judges to get some of the immigration cases moving, if he were to offer those three things, do you think the Democrats should consider compromising on their end?
Yes, they should.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that they should compromise.
I think that would be a good start.
They should allow some funding for the wall for now if Trump were to agree to some of their terms as well.
Getting the government working and getting those protections for like dreamers, that's obviously super important. And if like conceding like a small portion of that, of something that's probably not going to be done, it's like kind of a bittersweet kind of.
Did you know President Trump actually has offered that already?
Really? No, I didn't know.
Yeah. Are you surprised by that?
Yeah, yeah.
And what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know.
So, are you surprised by him offering those compromises?
The future.
I would say yeah. I would say it is pretty surprising.
Okay, that's awesome then. You know, I'm obviously behind a little. Last time I checked, it just said 31-day shutdown.
I'm pleasantly surprised that he's offered those things for sure.
Do you think the Democrats should have taken the compromise President Trump offered?
I do think so. The compromise isn't worth it to them, I guess.
Would you say Pelosi should consider compromising on that or hold the line? What do you think?
I think anything that gets things going again.
Yeah.
It was the wrong move for her to turn it down.
What would be your message to Nancy Pelosi in response to shooting down that offer?
Compromise.
Just get the Democrats to, budge, and that's basically all. There's not much.
I'm learning a lot. That's what I can say for sure.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
I don't know. Maybe on her end, maybe she should have a more open mind.
All right. We got to go to break here in a minute. But again, that was Cabot Phillips in Campus Reform, and the gentleman that you heard in the video where he said, "Oh, really? I didn't know that." Last I heard, it was just longest government shutdown ever. What did he say? Last I heard, it was 30+ days government shutdown. That's all they hear. The media has framed this entire thing as like the poor government workers. Never mind about the people who are dead because they've been murdered by illegal immigrants, or never mind about the drugs, never mind about the sex trafficking. Do you understand what the progressive left, your average progressive leftist college student would do if they actually knew about the human trafficking going on at the southern border? Do you understand the swell of support that they would have to address this outrage, this form of modern-day slavery? I said the word slavery. It is a modern-day form of slavery going on the southern border. Worldwide, the southern border is a big part of it. And can you imagine what the average progressive Me Too college student fight the patriarchy would do if the media actually told them how bad human trafficking was in the world and how America is complicit in it by not securing our southern border? It would be insane, the swell of support, because people would be like, "Oh wow, let's actually fix this problem." Instead, you have Nancy Pelosi calling a barrier immoral. They claim to have the moral high ground. It really is. It just is what it is. I was going to say it's a shame. It's not a shame. It's an embarrassment. It's I don't know. The disagreements between the left and the right the chasm is just so wide. It's just so wide. We're going to take a break. Telephone number, 870-275-9799. We've got a lot to get to. Going to talk some more about Arkansas taxes. Also going to talk about this Ten Commandments monument at the Capitol and Little Rock and the lawsuit that's going on. Interestingly enough, it was Mark Martin who was named in the lawsuit, the former Arkansas Secretary of State. Well, now it's John Thurston, so the title of the case is different because the state of Arkansas is being sued here. We'll give you the updates on that here in just a minute. Don't go anywhere.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
We're going to now kind of use our magnifying glass, and we're going to focus in on the citizens of Fort Smith. And there is a special election, as I understand it, that is coming up to vote for a tax increase in order to fund a museum. It belongs in a museum. Here to talk more about that, I want to introduce you to Fort Smith resident, Mr. Robbie Wilson joins us. Robbie, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you coming on the program to talk about this. I guess in order to educate our statewide audience, can you just bring us up to speed, maybe start at the beginning? What has brought the city of Fort Smith to potentially raising the taxes on their citizens?
Well,
Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
So there was a story, we didn't cover this story, well, we might have briefly mentioned it, but the Arkansas Times decided to sue, because the Arkansas Times, the very, very liberal publication, Arkansas Times, they decided to sue the government because there was some sort of there's a potential contract, and in order to do business, they had to sign something that basically said they weren't going to participate in a boycott of Israel, and they lost. And basically, they said that doesn't violate any sort of First Amendment or anything like that. So Senator Tom Cotton on Friday put out a statement, the following statement on the federal court ruling. Arkansas Times versus Mark Waldrip. Quote, a federal district court judge this week acknowledged the obvious. Businesses do not have a constitutional right to discriminate against the Jewish state. Government contractors, that's what it was, government contractors. Government contractors in Arkansas are required to certify that they will not participate in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement designed by Israel's foes or else face consequences. This requirement has been upheld. Congress now has the opportunity to build on this pro-Israel victory by passing the Strengthening America's Security in the Middle East Act of 2019. This bill would authorize continued military aid to Israel while protecting states like Arkansas that are combating the BDS movement, which is a boycott movement against Israel. And we had Rabbi Ari Spiro on to talk about that a couple of weeks ago, so be sure to see that interview. You can go get it on the YouTube channel. It's Conduit News. And while you're at the YouTube channel, we would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. You can hit the subscribe button, and then please click the little bell next to that to receive notifications as well. Coming up at the next hour, the bottom of the next hour, so about an hour from now, we'll be talking with State Representative Dan Sullivan. Will be back with us. Really, here, putting a bow on our last segment. About the government shutdown, reopening now, and everything else. Here is this headline from the Daily Caller News Foundation. Van Jones says that John Lewis, Sheila Jackson Lee opposed criminal justice reform because, quote, they just didn't want Trump to have a victory. And that, ladies and gentlemen, now we're on two different issues. The DACA kids in exchange for a barrier or a wall or a fence, or criminal justice reform that will actually help the very people that Sheila Jackson Lee and John Lewis claim to represent. But because President Trump is the president, because he would be seen as helping, aiding to solve the problem, we didn't support it because we don't need to see Trump win. It is incredible that this doesn't get more attention, but it's not going to. The only way it gets the attention is if you share articles like this Daily Caller article and others with everybody in your sphere of influence. And that doesn't necessarily mean only on social media. You could also talk about this stuff as well. Do it in a congenial way. But anyway, that to me, it's not just on the DACA issue. It's on every issue. Every single issue. Anyway, Trump derangement syndrome is a real phenomenon. We're going to take a break. Going to reset here. Talk a little bit about the 10 Commandments. Don't go anywhere.
Beginning, this Marshall's Museum project was conceived as a private project that would be contributed to by wealthy benefactors all over the country, and has been touted as a great thing for the River Valley and sort of the centerpiece of downtown development, or redevelopment, I should say, in Fort Smith. And what I'm hearing on the ground from a lot of people is that they're not against the idea of having the museum in Fort Smith. It's just the idea of the taxpayers putting the bill for it in the 11th hour.
Okay, so this is a museum that's going to just highlight, pay tribute to the United States Marshal Service. And, Fort Smith is obviously, because of the history there, is an ideal location for the museum. That's kind of the general consensus, right?
Yes, that's correct. And, like I said, for 12 years, the private funders have been trying to raise the money, and it seems like this is a push at the 11th hour to give this burden over to the taxpayers. And, from my perspective, I'm independent in my views. I kind of even lean to the left, unlike some of your viewers or your listeners. But what I can say is that people are united about this local issue, about how the rich shouldn't be asking people who are struggling under high utility bills, struggling with high water bills, just trying to live their lives to pay for this private special interest project. It just doesn't sit well with me, nor does it sit well with a lot of other people in Fort Smith.
So what would the tax increase be? What are we talking here?
Well, this would push Fort Smith's sales tax rate, when it's combined with the city, county, and state, up to 10.75%. We're inching towards 11%, which
my gosh,
is an oppressive sales tax rate, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Once we break that 10% threshold, people will really feel it in their bank accounts, and it will kind of desensitize people, maybe traumatize people when they're trying to buy groceries, for example, or medicine.
Yeah.
We just can't set a bad precedent like this by funding private businesses that heavily with tax dollars.
Okay.
The city can't afford it.
And this is a special election and coming up in March, correct?
That's correct. And how they ended up getting the special election is they went to city board members, evidently, and convinced them that they didn't have to do but one reading of the city ordinance. And the only way, typically, that you can get an ordinance to raise the sales tax is through petitioning, to put...
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
We're going to talk about this a little later, but the news came out on Sunday that State Representative Jeff Wardlaw, the former head of the Public Health Committee, he's still on the Public Health Committee, but he was chairman. His partner in his Medicaid-funded medical equipment business was David Norsworthy. This is the same David Norsworthy that sent $80,000 to Jake Files. It's just unbelievable. I mean, and also you also got Michael Morton is mentioned here, obviously, because Michael Morton and David Norsworthy are tied at the hip, or at least were. A high-ranking Arkansas lawmaker disclosed Friday that he is working for nursing home magnate Michael Morton. Now, that's what okay, so he's working for Morton now. But that's after the sale of the company. We're going to go over all of this on at 7 o'clock, but it is just slimy. You don't get any slimier than this, folks. Let me tell you. Using your position as a legislator to secretly enrich yourself. You don't get any. Make no mistake. That's exactly what this is. And to be resistant of that characterization, I don't think you really understand. If there are legislators out there listening, and I know there are, if you are resistant to that characterization after reading the report on this, I don't really know if you know what the problem is down there. But this certainly is one of them. And why Jeff Wardlaw is still on the Public Health Committee after this, I do not know. I do not know. Kathleen Clark, a law professor at Washington University, is quoted in this piece by the Gazette, and Eric Besson is saying, quote, "I think this is what we would call the swamp. Not that it's illegal, because the legislature decides what is illegal, and they've allowed it." Ouch. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what this is. Do not deny that Little Rock is a swamp. Are we going to clean it up? Are they going to clean it up? I hope so. I certainly hope so. This headline from Linda Satter: the state of Arkansas wants to stay monument lawsuit. Attorneys cite parallels in the Ten Commandments case. There's a contested World War. Okay, let me tell you what's going on here. So essentially, you have this statue. You have this monument, right? It was, just to be clear, and there was a bill filed, right? I believe it was Senator Jason Rapert several years ago, and it passed out of committee. Put a Ten Commandments statue on the property. Then it passed out of the Senate. Then it passed out of a House committee. Then it passed out of the full House. There was a whole process, right? And now we have the Ten Commandments. And you know what? I don't care if that has religious significance to you. I mean, it certainly has religious significance to me. I don't care if it has historical. It doesn't matter to me. The fact of the matter is, it's not mandating anybody. It's not mandating anybody practice any sort of religion. But I'll tell you what it did do. It did go through both two committees, two chambers. I do know it did that. And so for all you people out there that now think that you deserve a Baphomet statue, or any of you out there who are sympathetic with, well, they're just trying to prove a point. No. If they want their satanic statue, then they need to find a representative or senator to run it through committee and get it passed, just like Senator Raper did. And when you do that, and then we don't put a Baphomet statue, then you have a case. You have I would assume equal protection under the law, but it certainly has nothing to do with religion, and it has nothing to do with your First Amendment right to exercise and worship who you want to worship. And we're told that this case was filed because there are people who bike next to the Capitol, or they walk next to the Capitol, and they're atheists, and they just can't handle seeing a statue with words written on it. They can't handle seeing it's the Ten Commandments. I don't know. Maybe they feel judged or guilty. I have no idea. Or maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe I don't believe them at all. Maybe they're just being used to file this lawsuit in the first place. I don't know. Or maybe they are genuinely offended. I don't know. Either way, it doesn't matter. You know what? It doesn't matter. So that's what this lawsuit's about. All right. Well, the state of Arkansas is now saying, look, can we just get a stay on this case, because the Supreme Court right now is considering something similar that's going to probably make this thing a lot easier to decide. And it has to do with the Maryland World War I monument. It's what is it? Is it pronounced Bladenberg? It's a Bladenberg Cross Memorial, a passive display in the shape of a Latin cross located on Maryland state government property. And it is in the Supreme Court. Let's see here. American Legion versus the American Humanist Association. A case on appeal from the Virginia-based 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, and an opinion is anticipated no later than June, according to the motion filed. So in June, we're going to find out. Can you Google this, Joe? You take this. Go ahead and just take this screen down. I just want to see what we're talking about here. I want to see a photo of this Maryland World War I cross that they're saying. I'm sure. I mean, it's the same thing. You could just Google the American Legion versus American Humanist Association, and I'm sure it'll come up. They're saying that this is a violation of the First Amendment, because it's a war memorial. And it's a photo of a cross. Is this it? Maryland's Peace Cross to World War I veterans is under legal dispute. Look at this photo. I mean, that's incredible to me. First of all, it's very pretty, but we've got to tear down. Not only do we have to tear down let me ask you this. Why are we trying to edit history to a degree? And, there's probably some people out there that are like, you know what? I do think those Robert E. Lee statues need to come down. I can see their point. What about this? Should we start tearing down crosses now? Should we start tearing down the Ten Commandments on the side of the Supreme Court building? I'm sure there's many liberal leftist progressives that would say absolutely. Yeah, look at what New York's done. Good grief. Oh, my goodness. What's going on in the state of New York right now, folks, is, you know what Donald Trump's doing? Let me not necessarily actively, but passively or subconsciously. He's drawing the left out, isn't he? Think about this. He's drawing the left out. Do you think if Donald Trump were you think if Hillary Clinton were president, New York would have done what they've done? Now, they very well could have. They very well may have. Something tells me maybe not. Something tells me things would still be kind of covert here. Because to them, a woman's right to choose wouldn't be under assault, because Donald Trump wouldn't have been, have appointed 2 Supreme Court justices by now, a third on the way. I think we all know who that third is going to be, replacing. Donald Trump being president is drawing the left out. Folks, Donald Trump being president has gotten the left to react to say that they believe a baby carried to full term is allowed to be killed with no consequences. That is absolutely, that's That's like a misinformation campaign from the 90s. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, you could easily have said, somebody could have said that a long, long time ago, and people would be like, no, they just, no, it's only when it's just a little lump of cells, and the woman should have the right. And, you're demagoguing the issue. You're trying to make it out like we want to kill babies. And that was back when people weren't educated. There's a lot of people in Arkansas that used to think abortion was okay as long as it was just a little clump of cells and everything else. And it's like, we don't want, that's not really a baby. Remember the left used to say, it's not really a baby. It's just a clump of cells. And that's all we're talking about here is a clump of cells. It's not really. Well, my goodness. So what has happened? Well, in Arkansas, for an example, we got educated on the subject, right? And the science and when a child has, all of its fingers and toes. When is the heartbeat? When can it feel pain? Well, we think around 20 weeks it starts to feel pain and that sort of thing. Okay, all right. Well, so can we agree that we don't want to torture the baby to death if we're going to have abortions? Can we agree that we don't want that to happen? And then, of course, people start getting educated on partial birth abortions and everything else. And we quickly find out that it's not just some sort of moral gray area, it's just a clump of cells or anything like that. We quickly find out, oh no, this is life, this is a baby, this is something of value, and this says a lot. So we had a lot of people in Arkansas, by the way, that now are very pro-life because of the fact that information finally got to the people about what abortion is, and more importantly, what abortion is not. Abortion is not benign. Abortion is not just something that is some sort of moral gray area or like a easy medical procedure or something like that, And so people know that now. And because people know that and people are resisting, the left is now out there saying, you know what? You're right. We accept it's more than just a clump of cells. As a matter of fact, we think you should be able to kill the baby even if it's a second from coming out of the mother's womb. And it's carried to term. Wow. I mean, over the last 20 years, the left here has been smoked out. We've smoked them out. The fact that the New York legislature has done what they've done, they've been found out. They've been smoked out. Meaning the worst motives that many people wanted to assign those who were pro-abortion back a long time ago were right. Were true. They've been smoked out. And, it's because Donald Trump's in the White House that they feel the need to clarify for all. Shout your abortion. Light the Freedom Tower up in pink to celebrate your abortion. By the way, a building that was built to commemorate the death of 3,000 Americans is now being lit up in pink so that they can signify the death of Americans. Yeah, I think those babies are American. I think they have rights. I think they have no. I mean, not even under the Constitution. I think they've got rights because of God, because they are created by a creator. All of this. Comes back to truth. What is truth? And the truth is a Ten Commandment statue on the Capitol grounds in Little Rock violates no one's First Amendment right to religious freedom and to worship how they see fit. Period. The First Amendment is very clear. It says Congress shall make no law establishing a religion. And Congress hasn't made any law that mandates what the state religion is. Congress hasn't made any requirement that says you have to go to church, that you have to do this, that you have to be of this. The Congress has made no law. Now, Senator Jason Rapert and others passed a law that said we're going to build this. We're going to put a monument on the Capitol, and it's made of concrete, and it's going to have these words on it, and people can look at it. People don't. I mean, it's whatever, but it's not forcing you to do anything religiously. Oh, and by the way, I always feel like I need to make this point when we discuss religious freedom. What is, a violation of the First Amendment? What is not a violation of the First Amendment? Somehow, and I think the reason this has happened is because we as a nation exist and are living off of the fruits from a religious people and from a country that does have a foundation of Judeo-Christian principles, but the atheists get to act like, and the media and everybody else gives them the benefit of the doubt, that their unbelief is not a worldview. So they'll say, you're forcing your worldview and your Christianity on the people. You're forcing that on everybody. And they say that as if secularism and atheism and unbelief is not also a worldview. That would be, if they tear that Ten Commandments statue down, that would be atheism's godless worldview being forced on all of us. And that is something that is always missing from this discussion. Somehow they think they exist in some sort of, reality where there's just an exception or where their worldview is not a worldview. I mean, and think about this. I mean, if you are, if you're intellectual and I am too smart to believe in God, that is somehow, that is fine, and that is promoted and is accepted and celebrated in the scientific community, in the secular community. But they don't consider that a worldview that oppresses anybody who's religious, do they? But if you're religious and that gets out in the secular realm at all, or that gets out in the public realm at all of a sudden that is oppressive to other people to see, to look at, to hear. There's a double standard there that no one ever talks about. And it's all because the left in this country, because we came from Judeo-Christian principles, there is an effort to tear it down and to destroy it and to change it. And that's why you got to take care of statues, crosses, and everything else. There's an effort to destroy. There is a reason the churches in New England are nothing more than museums now. They are like foreign lands compared to rural parts of this country. They're turning some churches up there in Boston into apartments because there just simply isn't anybody up there. Very few people, very few. There are some people up there, but very few people up there that are religious at all. We're going to take a break. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. That's an update on the Arkansas Ten Commandments Monument. They're asking for a stay to see what the Supreme Court will decide in this other case in Maryland about a World War I memorial cross. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, Policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
On the ballot, they didn't do any of those steps. It would have taken a lot of legwork on their part and some time, but instead they used their outsized power that they have because they're very wealthy, and they seem to have a lot of influence over the city board of directors. They were able to get them to vote to change their own rules so that they wouldn't have to read the ordinance. And there were other ordinances that they have to pass in order to make this work. Another thing is creating a public facilities board, which would essentially deprivatize the museum and set up a new board that would oversee the running of the museum after this passes, which hopefully it will not.
Is this the same Fort Smith government that brought us the River Valley Sports Complex and...
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Amy on Facebook writes, maybe if the cross were called a World War II memorial cross, Ocasio-Cortez would support it, because climate change is the same as World War II. Yep. Ocasio-Cortez. Hey, did you hear that I'm appropriating what? I'm appropriating her culture when I say Ocasio-Cortez? Oh, I see what you're saying. Sounded, I see, because it was too Spanish sounding. I got you. Well, here's some culture we can all agree on. The wonderful world of wizardry. Harry Potter has declared war. Harry Potter has declared war on Tom Brady. He said he would is going to Patronus him. Now, he didn't say that. But he has declared war on Tom Brady because Tom Brady's friends with Donald Trump and has a Make America Great hat, or has a Make America Great Again hat. This is the bout we've all been waiting for. Harry Potter is calling out Tom Brady. I'm no Tom Brady fan, but now I am one. I haven't been a Tom Brady fan ever. And all of a sudden, I find myself liking Tom Brady more and more. And don't get me wrong. I don't mind the Harry Potter films either. I don't mind them, but man, you are there to entertain me. Shut up about everything else. Like, you're there to entertain me. If the market, if it wasn't, oh man, it's just I can't stand these actors that think, well, I pretended to be somebody, so obviously I successfully pretended to be a little boy wizard, so obviously people want to hear what I have to say about American politics. I mean, this goes for all of them. Like, I like the Marvel series. I like Captain America, right? I like him less when Chris Evans opens his mouth. It's like, Chris, man, you do a great job playing a patriot, American. But, like, just because you successfully entertained me and convinced me that you were Captain America does not mean that you are smart enough to tell anybody anything about politics, or that somehow your opinion is more valid than someone else's because you successfully pretended to be Steve Rogers, okay? It just drives me nuts with these actors, man. It's crazy. I mean, you have this inflated sense of worth because, what, you're famous and you've done well financially, successfully. You're just an entertainer. That's all you are, is an entertainer. And you entertain the very people that you totally disagree with politically either. How do you square that? All right, so Harry Potter said that Tom Brady is a bad guy and that the whole, quote, the whole world is rooting against the Patriots because of Tom Brady. Quote, take that MAGA hat out of your locker, he said. And, of course, Harry Potter's real name is Daniel Radcliffe. No, is it Radcliffe? Radcliffe. He insisted the whole country is against Brady because he's kept a red Donald Trump campaign hat in his locker. Quote, I feel like that was the moment when we were like, as a country, oh, come on, dude. We all want to be behind you. You're awesome. Don't put that in there. So I'm rooting for the Rams. I don't know if they're going to win, but I want them to. And then he yelled, Expelliarmus! And vanished from the interview. Yep. You ever see, hey, by the way, do you know that Quidditch, is that the name of the game they play in the movie? You know Quidditch is an actual thing where a bunch of dorks get in a field with brooms and they have like a whole way to play it without actually flying on broomsticks. And it looks like somebody's herding cats. If you've ever seen somebody try to play this game like on YouTube or something, it's... it is ridiculous. Anyway, so yeah, you can waste time looking that up on your lunch break, or you can go to YouTube and Google Conduit News and subscribe and click the little bell to receive notifications. We got one more hour coming your way next. Going to talk more Arkansas corruption, secretly enriching yourself while being the chairman of the Public Health Committee.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
On the ballot, they didn't do any of those steps. It would have taken a lot of legwork on their part and some time, but instead they used their outsized power that they have because they're very wealthy and they seem to have a lot of influence over the city board of directors. They were able to get them to vote to change their own rules so that they wouldn't have to read the ordinance. And there were other ordinances that they have to pass in order to make this work. Another thing is creating a public facilities board, which would essentially deprivatize the museum and set up a new board that would oversee the running of the museum after this passes, which hopefully it will not.
Is this the same Fort Smith government that brought us the River Valley Sports Complex and Jake Files, convicted felons, former Senator Jake Files?
One and the same, yes, Paul. That's the same Fort Smith.
And that was some sort of public-private marriage in some way, right?
Yes, I don't know all the details of what happened with that, all of the nuances that were going on behind the scenes, but I can tell you from just the perspective of an average person that it seemed like we had a few developers who were trying to get the city to form a partnership with them so that they could fund this project. It's a smaller scale project than what the Marshall's Museum was, but the mechanism is the same, and it's wrong.
I just want people to know, out of all the text and stuff and context I get, and those of you who are listening on KFPW right now in Fort Smith, the Marshall, I get so many communications from people in Fort Smith. Just they talk about the corruption or alleged corruption in their own local government. I can't tell you how many people text in about that. I know that's not what we're talking about specifically, but I just wanted to say that to the listeners out there who are listening. I hear you. So this is interesting. I want to know. This was originally a private endeavor, and they're saying, listen, we're going to privately fund a museum to commemorate the United States Marshal Service. And now all of a sudden they're going to the taxpayers because they don't have the money to build. So what happens? I mean, who owns this? Is the city now going to own the museum? Is there still a private entity? Let's say the tax passes. Hopefully it won't. But is the city going to own the museum? Is there still a private entity that's going to be making money or profit off of the people that come and visit the museum?
Well, it will not be owned by the museum if the Public Facilities Board owns it, to answer your question. They're trying to create the Public Facilities Board so it can own and oversee the museum, which would be leased from the Public Facilities Board. It's very convoluted, and I'll tell you, I think that I've figured out one of the reasons why they're doing this. And it has to do with municipal bonds. And they talked about this in an informational meeting they had on Wednesday. And they said that in the future, in order to cover some of the upkeep costs for the museums, they may have to ask for municipal bonds. And as we know, private companies wouldn't be able to ask the city to issue bonds. But a Public Facilities Board, on the other hand, could. So it seems to me like this is planning ahead so that in the future they can ask the taxpayers for more money for their private projects.
Robbie, you are exactly right. That is exactly what they're doing. And, you know, we've talked about many times, we always talk about how bond issues are debt, and that is actually a way to, I think it's all about future tax increases. And this is kind of coincidental because we have a tax increase in March that could potentially lead to more bond issues, and I think bond issues leverage your city government to where if there are tough economic times, they're going to go back to the people to raise taxes again so that they can service the debt. I mean, that's always the potential there. And so this is just fundamentally a growth in the size of Fort Smith's government and positioning it for more growth.
Well, it's certainly going to lead to some inflation in the downtown area. And some people may wonder, well, why does he say inflation? Well, I'll tell you why.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, welcome. Those of you who missed the first hour, you can get it, the podcast, video archived or audio only up at conduitnews.com. We talked about government shutdown. We talked about the Ten Commandments statue. Also talked about Harry Potter and Tom Brady. Harry Potter doesn't like Tom Brady because of his MAGA hat. Anyway, yeah, you got to be aware. Yeah, Joe, that's right. You have to be aware. It is now a crime. Wearing a MAGA hat while being white is now a crime. I don't think it's a crime. I don't know. It probably is a crime if you're black, too. Probably more of a crime if you wear a MAGA hat while being black. All right. So let's get to some Arkansas news here. On Sunday, this was, I hate to say it, par for the course, but we now know a whole lot about State Representative Jeff Wardlaw. And it is not good, not for the taxpayer. But it's been good for him. It's been a good ride for him in terms of, the money and the things, businesses that he has been concealing while being the head chairman of the House Public Health Committee. Eric Besson with excellent reporting here. I got a text message about that, too. I've read Eric Besson's stuff before, But the text message I got was, Eric Besson, how long do you think he's going to be at the Democrat Gazette with reporting like this? This is very good reporting by Eric Besson. He writes that a high-ranking Arkansas lawmaker disclosed Friday that he is working for nursing home magnate Michael Morton. First of all, huge news. Michael Morton, a guy who allegedly is involved in bribing Judge Mike Maggio to lower a nursing home judgment. Michael Morton is a nursing home owner. Gilbert Baker has been indicted as essentially the courier of the bribe to the judge. That judge pled guilty and is in jail. That's where we are. State Representative Jeff Wardlaw, Besson goes on, told the Arkansas Democrat Gazette that he sold his 1/3 share of a durable medical equipment company he co-founded to Morton last month. Morton acquired or bought 100% of the company, Mallard Medical Supply, and has retained Wardlaw as a managing employee. Quote, I didn't carry any cash home from the sale, Wardlaw said. I got no cash out of it. I've got a job, end quote. Wardlaw revealed the transaction in an interview as the newspaper was preparing an investigative article about his ties to one of Morton's business associates, David Norsworthy. Now, you'll remember David Norsworthy because he's the guy that sent Jake Files $80,000 shortly after a bill was filed to reform the tort system, meaning the judgments against nursing homes or potential judgments against nursing homes. You'll remember that. Wardlaw and Norsworthy had been partners in the medical supply company, a fact previously unreported. So we're going to find out in this article that Jeff Wardlaw here, in his statement of financial interests for the last several years, has disclosed to the public that he has this company called Mallard Medical Supply, but never disclosed that a nursing home owner, David Norsworthy, was his partner. And he sits on the head of public health? Just keep reading here. The deal with Morton and Wardlaw's co-ownership of Mallard Medical Supply are significant because the legislator has played a key role in overseeing laws and rules for the nursing home industry since 2017. State ethics laws allow legislators to write, vote on, and argue for bills that would help themselves or their associates. That the 5-year-old partnership between Wardlaw and Norsworthy was not publicly known underscores the limitations of existing disclosure laws. I seem to remember somebody somewhere several times trying to get a Medicaid disclosure law passed. Oh, right. Yeah, that was Senator Brian King. Oh, yeah. And that was one of the people that the governor picked sides against when it came time during a Republican primary. The guy that actually wants to force legislators to disclose their relationship with Medicaid entities. Because, well, the crazy thought was that you had all these guys down there who were making all this money on the side because they had secret relationships with Medicaid providers and Medicaid entities. It was this crazy idea. I mean, way far out there in left field. I mean, like, the McCarthy, it was like compared to like McCarthyism and like the Red Scare. Like, this guy's crazy. And here we have this exact situation now unfolding. Exactly what he said. Exactly what he was trying to get to the public. Brian King. It's exactly what was going on. I wonder how Jeff Wardlaw voted on that Medicaid disclosure bill. Oh, yeah. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that real soon. Wardlaw's business relationship with Norsworthy and now Morton, this is back to Eric Besson's story, also raised conflict of interest questions at a time when legislative leaders have called for stricter ethics and disclosure rules. Federal investigations into corruption at the Capitol have resulted in the indictments or convictions of several former lawmakers since early 2017. Quote, I think this is what we would call the swamp, Kathleen Clark, a law professor at Washington University in St. Louis who works in government ethics. Not that it's illegal, because the legislature decides what is legal, and they've allowed it. Wardlaw, from 2017, State Representative Wardlaw, from 2017 to 18, was chairman of the House Public Health, Welfare, and Labor Committee, the first gatekeeper for laws and rules facing the nursing home industry, Medicaid, durable medical equipment, which is what his business is, and other health care matters. He is now co-chairman of the powerful Arkansas Legislative Council, which has ultimate approval of state rules and contracts under lawmakers' review. He remains on the Public Health Committee as a voting member. And he says this, that I plan on recusing on anything that looks like a conflict with any industry that ties to my business. I'm not going to get in the middle of something that can come back and bite me. Well, that's what this article is, Jeff. This is the article that comes back to bite you, sir, because you've already been and gotten into the middle of things. That's what this article is. Now, Michael Morton has a spokesperson, Matt DeCampbell. I'm assuming this is the same Matt DeCampbell that was the spokesperson for Governor Mike Beebe. Quote, Wardlaw still runs the company, essentially, but he has no ownership stake, DeCampbell said. He didn't get an increase in salary or anything like that. He's still running the show. It's a good investment for Mr. Morton. It's a growing company and a part of a long-term care industry where you don't always see that. I wonder if Wardlaw had any, employment insecurity anxieties when the Gilbert Baker indictment was announced 3 weeks ago. Eric Besson goes on, Mallard Medical Supply, listen to this, is a Medicaid and Medicare enrolled provider of durable medical equipment items such as wheelchairs, oxygen tanks, and other prescribed supplies. Now, to me, this is where it really gets dicey for Jeff Wardlaw here. Because, and I think we'll find out here, the fact that, at least what I read, well, let me just keep reading to make sure, okay? Both Morton and Norsworthy have been subjects of investigative scrutiny in recent years. Campaign contributions that Morton made in 2013 formed the basis of former Circuit Judge Michael Maggio's guilty plea to federal bribery charges. Separately, a special state prosecutor is investigating the $80,000 wire transfer that Norsworthy made in November 2014 to then State Senator Jake Files' construction company. Files pled guilty in January, an unrelated case to felony charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and bank fraud. In June, he was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Norsworthy, of the Northwest Arkansas town Gateway, is a key player in Arkansas's nursing home industry. He has served as president of the industry's statewide lobbying association, and he is the officer for a campaign finance committee that directs industry contributions to select House members. Norsworthy also holds stock in 15 nursing homes across the state as a minority partner to Morton, according to Medicare records. Morton is a majority owner in about 30 nursing homes. So, Wardlaw has extensive experience in selling durable medical equipment and did even before taking office in 2010. He is a certified assistive technology professional, meaning he can help determine what equipment an individual patient requires. Before forming Mallard Medical Supply in 2013, Wardlaw worked as a contractor to a different durable medical equipment provider called Medical Necessities. Mallard Medical was Norsworthy's idea, according to Wardlaw and Norsworthy. Norsworthy, in an emailed statement, said existing durable medical equipment suppliers at the time were failing to provide same-day delivery service to patients who were transitioning from nursing homes after receiving rehabilitative services. They had a third partner, according to Eric Besson, Richard Rick Williams, a Hot Springs property developer who at the time had business interest in home health care providers. Okay. And that is who, it says, business attorney, said Norsworthy introduced Williams to Wardlaw. Mallard Medical is based in a small building in Warren, about 16 miles west of Monticello. The office is open 5 days a week, according to the schedule posted on the front window. Inside the small wood-paneled storefront, a row of display wheelchairs, walkers, and scooters extends from a medical bed. Stuffed ducks hanging from the ceiling. Mallard being the operative word in Mallard Medical. On one wall, after smaller medical items such as compression stockings, on the opposite wall hang dozens of plaques. Okay, we can kind of skip down here. Wardlaw, on October 2nd, 2014, filed an application. Now, this is key. Okay, this is key here. He filed an application back in 2014 to enroll Mallard Medical in the state Medicaid program. He attributed the lapse in time from the firm's founding to the lengthy process of enrolling in Medicare, which is a prerequisite to participating in Medicaid. At the time, he was equal partners with Norsworthy and Williams. According to the application he filed, Mallard Medical Supply was enrolled as a Medicaid provider in October 2014. Medicaid paid the company more than $905,000 from fiscal years 2015 to 2018, according to state figures. Medicaid is the federal and state-funded health insurance program for children in low-income Arkansans. The newspaper hasn't determined how much money the company drew from other sources, such as private insurance or Medicare, the federally funded insurance program for the elderly. And this is where it gets dicey. Partnership concealed. Wardlaw disclosed his holding in Mallard Medical Supply on routine statement of financial interest filings with the Secretary of State's office as required of lawmakers and special appointees to boards. But the forms do not require filers to identify business partners. Norsworthy omitted Mallard Medical Supply from the forms he was required to file as an appointee to the Health Services Permit Commission in 2015, 2016, and 2018, thus making it difficult for interested people to identify the pair's mutual financial interest. Norsworthy's filings listed dozens of other nursing homes, holding companies, and other businesses, but not Mallard Medical, because that would link him directly to the chair of the Public Health, the chairman of the Public Health Committee. Eric Besson, again, his emailed statement to the newspaper did not address a question asking why Mallard Medical was omitted and whether the disclosure should be amended. Okay. State law also keeps secret the members of private companies, so a person cannot determine the actual or beneficial owners of any businesses unless those owners reveal that information elsewhere. The Democrat Gazette pieced together the Mallard Medical Supply ownership chain after uncovering other public records, including a property deed, a mortgage filing, lien records, and paperwork that Wardlaw filed to enroll as a Medicaid provider. Not all businesses leave such a paper trail. It sounds like the disclosure standard needs to be beefed up, said Clark, the law professor. I think you've made a case on why constituents ought to have easy access to information about not just the names of lawmakers, businesses, and general description, but business partners. Yeah, you think? Just a little bit? Now we get down here to House Speaker Matthew Shepard, Republican from El Dorado, who decided committee assignments this month. Now, Wardlaw is still on the Health Committee, but he's not the chairman anymore. Representative Jack Ladyman is. House Speaker Matthew Shepard represented Jeff Wardlaw in his 2017 divorce. Mallard Medical Supply was one of the assets addressed in the settlement agreement. Shepard was familiar with Wardlaw's holdings in Mallard Medical Supply, but did not know who his business partners were, he said. Within the past 6 months, Wardlaw told Shepard that he used to be business partners with Norsworthy but no longer was, Shepard said. Quote, I don't know that I had any reaction, he said. This is a citizen legislature, and members have business dealings and work for various entities and have different interests, personal and professional. Okay, well, that is not a very comforting statement from Matthew Shepard about this. And listen, that's because these guys are friends with one another. I'm just going to tell you right now, these guys are friends with one another. I mean, when I say these guys, it just means that legislators in general, they're friends with one another. The principal thing to do here is say, this looks terrible. This is awful. This is not good. This man was doing business as a Medicaid entity. His partnered with a nursing home owner, and he's the chair of public health, and nobody knew about it? This is not good at all. He goes on to say, I encourage my members to make sure they are handling everything appropriately, that they are making proper disclosures through statements of financial interest, that they are doing everything to comply with the law. Sounds to me like the law needs to be changed. On October 12, 2016, Wardlaw and Norsworthy mortgaged the property, or a property at value of $550,000 as collateral for a $1.8 million loan, according to real estate records. Eric Besson's report goes on. Norsworthy also pledged 66% interest in the company as collateral. Wardlaw put up 33%, financing records show. Wardlaw said the purpose of the loan was to pay off debt and buy out Williams' share, the Hot Springs guy. The loan has been repaid, Wardlaw said. Norsworthy's email to the newspaper did not address questions about the loan. The lender of the bank was Heartland Bank out of Little Rock, was acquired by Simmons Bank in 2017. Let's see here. We're going to skip down. The banking stuff is interesting, though. In the past month, Wardlaw recused from discussing or voting on 2 issues. Both times he cited position with the Southeast Arkansas Area Agency on Aging as a potential conflict. One of the matters he refrained from discussing was the Human Services Department proposed cut to Medicaid rates. Critics said the change, which was approved, will ultimately drive more people into nursing homes. His second recusal was on a state contract for the transportation services with the Agency on Aging. But Wardlaw, whose legislative profile page lists his occupation as farmer, never filed a special disclosure to let the public know that he or his partner had a personal interest in some of the matters before the Public Health Committee. In 2017, Wardlaw voted in favor of legislation affecting durable medical equipment suppliers. Act 372 allowed nurse practitioners to prescribe such supplies. Previously, a doctor's order was required for Medicaid reimbursement. The law, sponsored by Representative Mary Bentley, originated in the House's Public Health Panel. Bentley's first draft would have given advanced nurses authority to sign off on jury duty excuses and end-of-life plans and other matters. She later amended the bill to include durable medical equipment prescriptions. Wardlaw said he did not notice the durable medical equipment portion of the bill until last year, when the Department of Human Services proposed revisions to the Medicaid providers' manual in order to align with the law. Okay, well, so we'll believe that one, I guess, right? Are we going to believe that? State laws do not prohibit lawmakers from voting on or discussing matters that affect their personal interest. The disclosure rule only applies only if a lawmaker is required to take an action that may affect his or her financial interest. Even then, a special disclosure is required only if the conflict is not readily apparent on a lawmaker's annual financial interest statement. Wardlaw's financial interest statements disclose his holdings in Mallard Medical Supply, describing the business as medical sales. He has never specified that it was a Medicaid-enrolled dealer. Okay, I've read the whole article really to get to this point. This, to me, is the biggest deal. The guy's making money off of taxpayer dollars that go to fund Medicaid. He discloses that he's got Mallard Medical Supply, but not that it was a Medicaid-enrolled dealer of durable medical equipment. To me, this is an even bigger deal than being partners with David Norsworthy. The question is this. This is the question. Given the fact that we know you've used your position as a state legislator to secretly enrich yourself and business partners, should you still be in office today? Back in a moment.
When you take an area that is older and the property values have gone down over time, and I'm an accountant by trade, so I know a little bit about this. When you have low property values, you can go in and spruce the place up, do some redevelopment, refurbishing of buildings, and that will cause property values to increase. And so I think that part of the overall plan is that they're going to use the museum and some other projects that we haven't even conceived of in the future in order to raise these property values so that the owners can flip their properties later for a lot more money. And that's going to push older businesses out, maybe, that don't have as much money. It'll push poor people who live in the area out because they can no longer afford to live there. And the people who stand to gain from all this, don't be fooled.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So I know it's news to us that Jeff Wardlaw, the former chair of the Public Health Committee in the House at the Marble Palace, it's news to us that his business partner was David Norsworthy, nursing home owner. It's news to me, that he was enrolled in Medicaid. It's news to us that he now works for Michael Morton. Remember, Michael Morton was on one of the nursing home regulatory boards, but after Michael Morton kind of got some bad press, which is an understatement, Governor Hutchinson replaced Michael Morton with David Norsworthy in that position on that board. All of this is news to us. Was it news to other people in the legislature? That's the question. Who knew? I mean, who knew this was going on? How many people knew about this secret relationship David Norsworthy and Jeff Wardlaw had that they obviously worked to hide and conceal? How many people knew about it? And I think there definitely were, the press and you and me are just now finding out, but I think there's definitely some people that were finding that knew about this. There had to be. There had to be people who were in on this. The last line of this article really, really makes me mad. Again, Eric Besson did a great job. Wardlaw said Friday that he plans to amend the forms to clearly identify the company as a durable medical equipment provider. Well, what's that going to do? That's the most offensive part. Well, is that going to somehow, are you going to give the profits back? By going back and amending the records, does that somehow make you poorer? I mean, that's even more offensive. Well, I amended the report. Yeah, but you still voted in favor of your own financial interest and made a bunch of money off of it over and over and over again. My goodness. We'll be back here in just a moment.
Well, they're not the citizens themselves, but just the investors in that area.
Exactly.
And I think it's wrong for the wealthy to use the government and their power over elected officials because they're so wealthy in order to get everything they want. That's just fundamentally wrong in my view.
But it happens all the time. I mean, in the form of corporate welfare. And I want to remind everybody that, issue 3, which is, there's been a couple issue 3s, but the one that they touted as a jobs amendment, a couple of years ago, it actually opened the door and it allowed local county and city governments, to potentially finance bonds the way the state does when they have these super projects. And, I mean, it is just an absolute nightmare. So we're talking with Robbie Wilson. He's a citizen of Fort Smith. You also heard he's an accountant. Robbie, I want to know how much money they're trying to raise from the taxpayers of Fort Smith to pay for this museum. What do they think it costs to build this building?
Well, that's a great question, and it's the $1 million question, or I guess we'd call it the $53 million question, which is the final number that I've heard that it will cost to construct the entire thing. Not just the building, but to put all the exhibits and displays in the building. And I'd like to point out that this has been going on for 12 years, and it took them 12 years to get what they say is $35 million. So they're not even after 12 years to the finish line, and they admit that the admissions and revenue projections that they have acquired from a company that they hired, which is another story, will only cover about 75% of their expenses, and that's using an inflated number of 125,000 visitors every year. I question that too.
So they think, once this museum is open, that 125,000 people a year are going to come to Fort Smith to study the U.S. Marshal Service?
That's what they say. That's what the company that they hired, which is based in the United Kingdom. They're not from Arkansas or from Fort Smith.
I saw that. I saw the Times Record. They're from London, right?
That's right, yes.
So they've got a London company planning a museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas. What sense does that make?
Well, I've asked that question myself. It makes no sense to me because, and no offense to anyone from London or our friends across the pond, but I don't see how they would ever know what.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Good morning to everybody out there. Hope everybody is staying warm. We want to welcome back to the program. We got State Representative Dan Sullivan in the studio with us. Dan, welcome, sir.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're, the third week of session? How things are going so far?
Well, they're going really well. You know, I had a meeting this weekend with a group. I met with a group. They were meeting, and they'd have met with or without me. But, you know, I had the feeling during that meeting that I was right back with the founders. People sitting down, discussing the Constitution, discussing their rights. And I'm not going to mention what group it was, but it was really refreshing and incredible to sit there for an hour and a half. Nobody left. Nobody got up. And we talked about what our constitutional rights are. We talked about what our God-given constitutional rights are. It was really curious because I was anxious or interested in what would happen in church yesterday about the discussion of the issue in New York. And I know you talked about that extensively.
Oh, my gosh.
Where people cheered about the abortion rights and about the ability of a state who can now, if a child survives abortion, they can kill the baby. And I fully expected from our church to have a prayer about that, and for our nation to be healed, and for us to repent, just not only as a state of Arkansas, but as a nation. And I'm really concerned that our pulpits are silent on this issue and not standing up. And so when I asked a few people after church what they thought about that, you know, they were, well, that's just not our style. We don't talk about that that way. We don't address those issues that way. And I started thinking about the group that I met with on Saturday and how they understood that those rights are God-given and that the government should make no law that supersedes God's law. And I thought about people's unwillingness in the setting on Sunday to stand up and talk about our God-given rights compared to the people on Saturday who were talking about their God-given rights. And I'm really concerned that our faith-based community, their willingness to stand up for what God says, which is now being superseded by what the state says. And people need to realize that there are Arkansas legislators right now crafting language that about abortion, about free speech, about Second Amendment, that would limit our God-given rights and let government supersede those. I hope I'm not digging down too deep in that, but it's really concerning.
But people have to stay engaged.
Stay engaged, and it was so refreshing to hear people. And I know there's a new organization being founded, the Freedom Coalition, I think.
You mean the Arkansas Liberty Coalition?
Liberty Coalition,
yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. You know, now the Patriots of Act 746, 17,000 strong, have a voice. And I sure hope people will seriously consider what's going on with the Liberty Coalition. Look into that, because we and people need to speak up about their rights.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, you mentioned a bunch of stuff there, but you also mentioned freedom of speech. Now,
yes,
there was a story, and there's an ongoing lawsuit because of Arkansas State University, my alma mater, and freedom of speech zones, or there was a Turning Point USA attempted to, I think, set up a booth and get, get people to sign up for that organization, and they were prevented from doing so, and that resulted in a lawsuit, correct? Kind of refresh our memory on that.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that lawsuit is still standing, and as a matter of fact, across the state, in many of our universities, we have varying degrees of limits on free speech. Again, another God-given right.
Yeah.
I, along with Senator Hammer and several other senators and House members, have been working on a free speech bill. We'll be filing it. I think it may have been filed Friday, but it'll be filed this week, that will eliminate those free speech zones. It goes a long way towards protecting our religious organizations that are on campus, too. Many of our churches have student centers and such on campus, and while many of our universities are friendly towards that, their policies are not. And often it's a matter that they just choose not to enforce a policy. So this bill will go a long way towards allowing free speech on campus, getting rid of those free speech zones, protecting our organizations and such that are on campus. That should be filed this week, and I look forward to that passing.
Now, so there's another one. There's another freedom of speech bill that has been filed as well, that's already been filed. This one, so do you know about the other one? What's the difference between
Well, Representative Hammer and I both had bills on that.
Okay.
And we got together, and now there'll be one bill that goes forward.
Okay, so it's going to be one.
Yeah, it's part of that good legislative process where you have people who both have an idea about freedom and liberty, who sit down together and work through it. The big question out there, Paul, there's a continuum. What kind of language do you allow that doesn't cause a disruption on campus? To use foul language, and there are words that can be used, language that can be used, insightful language that can be used, that can be disruptive on a college campus. So you have to draw a line somewhere as to what's allowed and what's disallowed to allow the university to have some control over speech. They need that over the freedom of speech. So Senator Hammer's bill and mine had a little bit different language in there, and we sat down together and worked that out. So we think it has the right tone about giving the university the opportunity and the responsibility of controlling chaos on campus, what might lead to chaos on campus, but also allowing free speech. And I think we reached a good settlement on that.
Okay, so both bills were trying to solve a problem. And you
which was limiting free speech on campus.
Yeah. We don't want that. We don't want that.
We want free speech on campus. We've gone a long way towards getting rid of these free speech zones.
Okay, good.
Gone a long way towards allowing not just students, but people like you and me to go on campus and talk about what free speech is.
Okay, so that'll be filed this week. What else we got going on?
Well, I'm working with Senator Gary Stubblefield, and I'm going to be the one to carry his bill in the House. He's the one that worked on it, but it's very similar to Mark Johnson's bill about retirement benefits and removing those retirement benefits.
So it's an anti-corruption bill.
Anti-corruption ethics bill, yes, and it is a little bit different than Senator Johnson's, and that it takes a few different remedies. So I'm hopeful that, again, Senator Stubblefield's the lead on this, and I would anticipate he and Senator Johnson probably getting together. But you'll see some good ethics legislation come out, regardless of what it is. But it's pretty strong. When you start taking people's retirement, one of the differences, our Senator Stubblefield's bill talks about when you're convicted of a crime. And there's just a little bit different language in there, but both of them, again, well-intended and doing the right thing, moving in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these are the discussions that need to be had. That's what's so positive about it.
Yeah, and that's what really encouraged me Saturday, to hear people talking about these issues. You know, how many groups are there in the state that really talk about what the Constitution says, really stands up for your rights? You know, Conduit is one. You can agree or disagree with them, but there are very few organizations in the state that really lay on the table what your constitutional rights are. And then let's just have the debate. And, you know, and I've had several debates with Conduit. I agree on some things, disagree on a few things, but we've been able to come on the show and have that debate. Mm-hmm. And it really, you know, I hadn't thought of this before, but that's exactly what happened at the founding. Mm-hmm. People talked about what the Constitution said. They talked about what your rights were, and we had that open debate. And I sure hope the citizens of Arkansas will look for, and of course, I think your listeners are on the forefront of that. But, you know, at this meeting where I was Saturday, I met a lot of people, first-time people, hadn't really been to a debate like that. I invited somebody, you know, so it's really good to hear that. You know, we're just talking about other legislation we have coming out. I'm working on the advanced practice nurse legislation that's been defeated twice.
Yep.
And much more than twice. I've run it twice.
Well, you know, the one thing about that advanced practice nurse piece of legislation that the medical community needs to understand is that if it passes, the sky will fall.
Well, you know, they have hired more lobbyists.
Oh, I'm sure.
They've hired a bunch of lobbyists coming up, and, you know, I have running legislation with UAMS that deals with UAMS, and UAMS lost $30 million last year. They
when you say lost, you mean like lost it or lost it?
Well, you know, that's another discussion. They were $30 million in the red, and some of it was intentional. I don't want to go into the details of that, but they have a new chancellor now, and I've been working very closely with them because that $30 million is taxpayer money. That's money that the taxpayers are paying for health care. They're paying to educate our doctors. And UAMS is a great institution. They're the only institution we have in the state, or, well, one of the only now, educating our doctors. So when we lose money in that program, that's $30 million that did not go towards educating physicians in our state. That's so. Again, our new chancellor, Dr. Patterson, I'm working closely with him, and I hope that we can have legislation come out of this that will support UAMS and help them to at least break even. You know, I don't want to go into all the details, but there are lobbyists that are hired to kill this kinds of legislation, just like the advanced practice nurse legislation. Paul, it's no different from what happened in the nursing home industry. You know, they are so powerful, and the medical society lobby is so powerful that they don't need all the votes. They just need enough to kill it, which is only usually the difference between 11 votes or 9 votes. And if you are a legislator and you're running for office, you depend on those campaign donations. And guess who makes a lot of campaign donations?
Yeah.
Or you have an opponent, just like I did.
Yeah, from the medical community.
From the medical community. They can afford to triple my spending.
They outspend you 3 to 1.
Me 3 to 1.
Yeah, you still won, though.
Still won. But that's because the people got out and got engaged. They talked about the issues. They learned about the issues. They held him accountable for his words when he was untruthful and out lied. And the Jonesboro Sun had to run an article on that. That's what we're up against in the freedom argument, to allow people to be free and make decisions on their own. There's a strong lobby opposed to that in all that medical community, whether it's nursing homes, the medical society, and we face a strong uphill battle. So I hope people will get engaged with their local legislators.
You know, I think people we've been talking about how people do want honest government, and, you know, when you do have these big programs or these big industries that the government is already heavily involved in, if we're going to have it, and we're going to have a certain level of spending and taxpayer commitment in these, then the people rightfully demand that the money's accounted for and it's spent well, and that when something is not working, that reforms should be welcomed and not resisted.
It's really hard when people call me and they disagree with me. It's really hard. I just soon not take that call. I just soon not have to have that conversation.
But you do take those calls.
You do. And I met with over 200 teachers over a bill last year. I've got a meeting set up with teachers soon, and we don't disagree on much, but one or two things. But they want to talk with me, and I welcome that opportunity to sit down and talk with my constituents about what the issues are, what the constitutional questions are, what the ethical questions are. Those are the things that we need to have meetings about and sit down and discuss what's best for our state. The people that got left out this last time are disabled.
Yeah.
The people that don't have the resources and the opportunities, they don't have the lobbyists that they can hire to go represent them. And some of our most needy people in the state got left out when these conversations happened about the reform of health care. We had a task force, and we went out and had all these conversations about, how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that. Well, I think the nursing homes were the first ones to cut a deal with the governor's office, and that was taken off the table early on.
You mean reform in that area?
The reform in that area, and then the behavioral health ended up.
Meaning they said we're not going to reform, like we've already kind of reached.
We've reached an agreement,
Yeah.
And there were several. The dentist reached an agreement with the governor's office pretty early. There are several that did.
And this was back.
This is back 2 years ago.
Yeah, this was back when they
2015 maybe.
Yeah, so when they had the task force on health care or on Medicaid reform.
On Medicaid reform, and we
Okay.
talked about the people that, and of course this involved Arkansas Works also.
Yeah.
And the 138 million that will be 150 some million, and next year will be 216
It was
million.
only supposed to be 50 million, though. It was only supposed to be 50 million.
Yep. And the people that lost some of their care were some of the most needy people in the state of Arkansas, our people with disabilities, our assisted living. Those communities can't afford to hire lobbyists, and it's very difficult for them to have their voice heard and get the votes to pass what we need to take care of our first responsibility.
Well, State Representative Dan Sullivan, I know it's going to get even busier. I mean, it's going.
I'm headed down there as soon as we hang up here. I'm headed down there.
Well, best of luck to you. I'll see you down there
Thank
tomorrow.
You, Paul.
And we appreciate you coming on and giving us an update.
Thank you.
All righty. Folks, State Representative Dan Sullivan, we'll keep you posted on that campus freedom of speech bill. I know that's something that's important to all of us. I mean, it's the taxpayer-funded universities that aren't allowing free speech. Certainly need to change that. We're going to take a break. Be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
What the people of Fort Smith are like and what people in this region like to do. It's just number crunching for the sake of making their case that it could draw so many people, which I don't believe that it will. It is such a niche market. You know, the U.S. Marshals Museum will tell an interesting story, I'm sure, but how many people are really interested in hearing it, first of all? And look how long it's taken them to raise the money that they have. It doesn't seem to me like there's a lot of interest
No, it doesn't.
or demand for this. The market has said, well, the market just isn't there for it. The market has said that there's not a chance that this thing could ever sustain itself.
Is that do you have the name of that London company that they're using to design all this? Do you remember that?
Yes, it's LDP, Leisure Development Partners.
Okay. What?
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us today. If you're just joining us and you missed the Sunday paper, then you missed the news about how a state legislator revealed that he's now working for Michael Morton, but he was business partners with David Norsworthy, and he was the chair. Jeff Wardlaw, State Representative Wardlaw, he was the chair of public health at the time. His business, Mallard Medical, is a medical supply company, medical equipment company, and he was approved to be reimbursed via Medicaid. That was not disclosed on his form. You can read that at the end of the article there. Let me scroll back up here because this to me was the biggest part. Wardlaw's financial interest statements disclose his holdings in Mallard Medical Supply, describe the business as medical sales, but he's never specified that it was a Medicaid-enrolled dealer. So he was hiding the fact that he was getting Medicaid dollars. And he was also hiding the fact, or at least we didn't know until today or yesterday, that his business partner was David Norsworthy. David Norsworthy didn't disclosed that he was business partners with Jeff Wardlaw. Seems to me they knew this was all going to come out eventually, which is why they really dissolved the company and had Michael Morton come in and buy it. And now Jeff Wardlaw works for Michael Morton, but he says he didn't make anything off of the sale of the company. Medicaid paid them over a short period of time $900,000. I mean, I know medical equipment's expensive, but my goodness, this looks just terrible. And the question remains. I mean, this is a state legislator at the head of public health who secretly enriched himself. He used his position as a state legislator to secretly enrich himself. And I will emphasize the word secret. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that the majority of Arkansans, the vast majority of Arkansans, left, center, right, think that this is wrong, that this is not the way things should be done, that this is corruption. Now, was there anything illegal done? At this point, it doesn't look like it, that this was all legal. And I'm going to point out once again that we would have known this had Senator Brian King's Medicaid disclosure bill pass. And now, and this is the truth, anyone, and I mean anyone who voted against that bill should go under the microscope, especially on that House committee 2 years ago. Anyone who voted against that bill, because it got out of the Senate last year. It surprised me that it got out of the Senate. And then it died in House committee because it would have required not only Jeff Wardlaw, but I have a feeling, logically it's not a big leap, other House members would have had to disclose the extra money that they're making by being affiliated with Medicaid entities. And it calls into question your vote. Had we known that Jeff Wardlaw and David Norsworthy had the same, had mutual financial interests together, don't you think people would have said, well, you should recuse yourself? And don't you think there would have been some stuff that wouldn't have gotten past that it ended up enriching themselves? I mean, they concealed this from you because they knew it looked bad. Keep in mind, Brian King, former Senator Brian King, the governor opposed him, former Senator Brian King who lost, his bill wouldn't have imposed any criminal penalty for making extra money on the side by doing business as a legislator with Medicaid entities. It would have just required that you let the people know about it so that your votes now come into question, and it's obvious that you're using your position as a legislator to secretly enrich yourself. That is the news right there, to secretly enrich yourself. And where did a lot of this money come from? Well, in 2013, the Arkansas legislature decided to embrace Obamacare and expand Medicaid, which meant that $2 billion a year suddenly flooded into the state. Now, not that it made the average person's life any better, but it made people who own medical supply companies, it was the Wild West, man. It was like it was like people, the government giving away land back in the 1800s. It was fantastic for people in the medical business, if you know what I mean. Now all that money's drying up, by the way, and we have to start paying it back. And now we find out a lot about why people get the chairmanships they get, why they keep the chairmanships they get, who's getting rich. By the way, David Norsworthy, the same David Norsworthy that transferred Jake Files $80,000 after a tort reform bill was filed. Boy, it's a tangled web, but everybody's kind of connected. It's like it's all one big scam. Arkansas, be safe.